It's time for this week's Uplift, encouraging words from two ordinary guys that want you and others to find the freedom in Christ that's available to everyone. So sit back and enjoy Uplift, brought to you by the Fulcrum Center. Visit our website at thefulcrumcenter.org to learn more.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Uplift. I'm Phil Bliss.
And I'm Jim Brehm.
Jim, it's nice to have you with me tonight.
Good to be here.
Ian couldn't be here. Ian is not feeling well. So Jim Brehm decided to sit in. Jim has been with me before at the table when we did Testimony Tuesday.
Yes.
I still remember that one very well. That was a really powerful one that night. But you know what, Jim? I thought tonight we'd go back to the beginning. How's that sound?
Good place to start.
Yes. Good place to start. You know, there's so much about the book of Genesis that we can learn from, and I mean even from the very first word. Now, in this Bible, as soon as I can get to Genesis, I didn't realize there were so many extra pages at the beginning.
Well, if I can steal a line from Adam Shellcross, that would be page 1.
This is actually page 4. Yeah, that's funny, though. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I mean, I think we all probably know that. Many of us know that. That's how the Bible begins. But that very first phrase, in the beginning, in Hebrew, well, let's see how many words it is in English. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 words in English. Okay, with the in there twice and the in there 3 times. It's 7 words in Hebrew.
Okay.
Now, I do not know how to pronounce these words, all of them, but I know the first one is Bereshit.
Yeah.
Okay? Bereshit essentially means in the beginning.
In the beginning.
And Bereshit bara Elohim et, and those are the first 4 words. Now, Elohim obviously is God. So what it's saying is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I believe that it's very important to know that God did that on purpose. He was like making a statement right from the get-go. I did this. Not any of you. I did this. I created everything that you know. Let's just get that right off the bat. Everybody knows God created the heavens and the earth.
Absolutely.
There can be no question about it.
Yes.
You know, you can say that a spark spontaneously combusted out of nothing. How the nothing got there, I don't know, but that we're not going to argue that point tonight. But anyway, okay, sure, somebody can say God created the Big Bang. Okay, God created it. I don't care how you look at it.
God created whatever was there.
Right. So I thought that if you don't mind, we'd maybe talk a little bit about Genesis tonight. And
I think that's excellent.
in the beginning.
I think the churches don't talk enough about Genesis, so
I agree with that. Is that because it's in the Old Testament? Is it because it is so old because it's the beginning? I don't know what the reason is, but you're right. Not just Genesis, the entire Old Testament. If I take a Bible and I separate, where the Old Testament ends and the New Testament begins, it's over half, almost 3/4 of the Bible is the Old Testament.
yeah.
And we spend so much more time in the New Testament, and which is very important, but we cannot neglect everything that happened in the Old.
I tend to think of it as God created us in his image. Then he gave us an owner's manual.
Okay.
And we ignore the quick start part and go straight to Jesus saved us because that makes us feel good.
I love it.
I mean,
That's a
it's
great...
Now, being a guy, I usually do ignore the quick start part until something screws up and I have to go back and check.
Yeah,
but
right.
But I think in this case, we need to learn the whole thing.
Right. And, when I was younger, I was probably in my 20s, I came across a church called the New Testament Believers Church. Now, I'm not going to say where it was. I don't even know if it's still open. But it always bothered me because they focused only on the New Testament.
Yeah.
And I didn't know a whole lot back then, but I knew enough to know that you need the Old Testament, like you said, like the owner's manual, the quick start guide. I like that. But you need that to really understand the new. You can't have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John without understanding that Joseph, for example, was a type and shadow of Jesus to come.
Absolutely.
Moses was, David was, Elijah was, in so many ways. And if you skip all of that, you can really miss the foundation of what the Gospels are.
Absolutely. It's all about the foundation. And I think that's where the church loses ground these days is we skip the foundation.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from Jesus coming to save us.
Oh, right.
But for someone who hasn't been in church most of their life, doesn't understand that,
Right.
we start right out, well, save us from what?
Exactly.
I mean,
Right.
if you don't understand the Garden of Eden
Right.
and that we had a choice,
Right.
then why do I need that?
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because we can even look back at the Gospels and see that the people didn't understand because, they didn't have a Bible in the form that we have.
Right.
In a book published by a Zondervan Publishers and distributed by Willow Creek Press and such. They didn't have that sort of thing back then. So they kind of went by word of mouth, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, they were the ones who knew what we would know of as the Bible the best. And if they taught you, then you knew. But what I'm getting at is a lot of people said, oh, this guy's come to save us. He's the Messiah. He's saving us from the Roman Empire.
Yes, absolutely.
But that's not what Jesus wanted.
Right.
He wanted more. He wanted what happened way back in the beginning in Genesis chapter 3, when Satan was very crafty and convinced Adam and Eve to sin. And he's been doing it ever since.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that's said about the enemy in the Old Testament, about Satan, that if we don't read that, we might have a false sense of who he is.
Yeah.
And we need to know who our enemy is in order to combat them.
Absolutely.
So you're right. And I remember a time when I was starting out in church, I was asked to teach Sunday school. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll teach Sunday school. They gave me the kindergartners, okay? This guy doesn't know anything. He can handle the kindergartners, which was a smart move on their part, because when they handed me this felt board with this guy named Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I'm like,
Who are these guys?
who are these guys?
Yes.
So I read the teacher's manual. Like, oh, so Abraham's the grandfather, he's the son, and then Jacob's the grandson. Okay, so I told a story, and I don't know, I haven't talked to any of those kids, but they're probably in their 20s or 30s now, and I hope they got something out of
They
it.
got something out of it. But yes,
I did.
Yeah. Well, lots of times that's how teaching Sunday school teaches you a lot.
Right. But even beyond that, there are things about the creation story that, honestly, we could talk for hours about the creation story.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I know you've got some ideas that you got very knowledgeable in this area, and I have some ideas, but, when we talk about the 7-day creation, I can't remember exactly how you said it to me one day, but
Neither can I.
okay, well, let's just say that you said something that really made me think about what I believed about it. This was probably a year ago or so, and I wish I could remember what it was. It was that profound that I can't remember. No, I'm just kidding. I just remember looking back and saying, well, I really need to think about how I look at that.
Yeah.
And if you stay open to that sort of thing, that's how you grow.
Yes. Well, and I think going to the 7 days of creation, because I think it's a pet peeve of mine a little bit, because I grew up, like I would guess most people, either we didn't talk about that, or we said, well, science can do what science says.
Yeah.
And but we know God created it, so it doesn't matter how he created it.
Well,
But then when you read the language, and you see the days that he created, and you start thinking about, like, there was light before there was a sun.
Right. Right.
Now, he wouldn't have put that, he didn't make a mistake
Right.
when he wrote that down.
Right.
And if you throw in the millions of years, like a lot of people say, between day one and day two, there could have been all this stuff. Except then you're saying that on day 6, when God said everything is very good on top of a bunch of dead animals and plants and all this death and destruction that's been going on in the earth for all this other time. So I'm forced to believe that it's 6 days.
Yeah.
And then when I start studying and looking into it, science really doesn't have an answer.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, what we teach and we tell you this is fact, that's not fact.
No.
There are so many things that they don't know. I was just reading recently that they don't even know for sure now that the speed of light is the speed of light, because the speed that they measure is only reflected light.
Really?
So because they can't measure light in a single direction,
It
they can
makes
only
sense.
measure it after it's reflected off of something and come back. So they don't even know that that's an accurate.
Wow.
Speed.
That changes everything, because that's that's where time comes into play.
Well, yes, absolutely. Everything is based
wow.
off of that. So now it's like, what do we really know?
You know what?
And then I go back to my owner's manual and say, okay, I'm going to go with this, because none of this other stuff adds up any better. So that's where I am.
I'm glad you said that, because it reminds me of something that happened in the book of Genesis, where this group of people trying to understand God, thinking that they can be closer to God, start building a tower.
Absolutely.
The Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11, I think it is, 10 or 11. And God looks down and says, oh, no. And he takes care of that, confuses their language, and they spread out across the world. But from the very beginning, since humans have been on earth, we have wanted to know about God, but we can't know about God. When you say we can't measure the speed of light.
We couldn't understand it if we wanted to.
Right. Our minds are so finite that we could not comprehend. So that's why faith is so important. That we have to take everything on faith. There are people that say, they say, I just won't accept the fact that you say there's one way to heaven, because they feel like it's excluding people. And I understand that. I don't like to exclude people. I've been excluded before. Yeah.
We should never, because that's not our job.
Right. And it's not exclusive, though. But that is their trying to understand what God did, and not understanding from the beginning what he did, and that it was good.
Right.
And we ruined it.
And why do we have all the issues we have today? Right. I mean, why do we have climate change? Because the earth is groaning.
Right.
Right. And once again, I just like to say climate change is actually just weather, but that's a political point of view.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. That's okay. But you started to hit on something earlier, and if I can just take a minute, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'll try to make this brief. And you know what? It's probably not fair to do this, because this really does take about 2 hours to fully understand. Okay. But I'll be brief, and maybe we can hit on it another time.
All right.
You said if we look at the language, and that's something that I've studied for a long time, the way Genesis is written, Genesis chapter 1, the way it's written.
Yes.
There's a passage in Isaiah 40-something, I don't know exactly where God says, have I not told you the end from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay? And he did. Absolutely. If we look at Genesis 1, you said, let there be light, and there was no sun.
Right.
Okay? So he separated the light from the darkness. Okay? In the very first day, he separated the light from the darkness. What happened in the first 1,000 years of time? It says that Adam and Eve lived to be 900 and some years.
Yes.
So within the first 1,000 years, okay, and to God, 1,000 years is like a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. That's in 1 Peter, also in one of the Psalms. So if we consider 1,000 years as a day, They died in that day. Because Satan said, Eve said, well, God told us that if we eat from the tree, that in that day we will die.
Well,
And
yes.
they did die within that day.
Yes.
Within that first 1,000 years, they died. And then if we can go on and say, okay, in the second day, he separated the waters from the firmament. And if we look at the next 1,000 years of time, what do we have? The flood. He separated the waters from the firmament, and there was a flood on all of the earth, which we could really spend a lot of time talking about that too.
Well, yes.
The next seed-bearing plants of their kind, he told Abraham, you'll be the seed of many nations. The fourth day, he created the sun, moon, and stars. 4,000 years of time was the time of the prophets, who were often referred to as being as bright as the stars in the sky.
The stars, yes.
The fifth day, he created life. He created life, like animal life. Not humans, but he created animal life. What happened in the 1,000 years of time? Jesus brought life.
Jesus brought life back
to the world.
Back to the lost world.
And then the sixth day, he created humankind, and he said, go and populate the earth and have dominion over it. In the 6,000 years of time, if we take 1999 as the just arbitrarily taking that time. In October of 1999, there was an article that came out that said there are now more people alive and living than have ever lived and died in all of time. Mm-hmm. So we had populated the earth and had dominion over it.
Yes.
So, and then the seventh day he rested, which will be 1,000 years of rest when Jesus returns. One belief, there's all kinds of beliefs about that. We won't get into that tonight.
You're getting real close to predicting when Jesus is returning.
Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that.
Ease up just a little bit.
We have no idea.
No, but it is. And really, I mean, Genesis 1-11 tells you everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it tells you. It tells you the serpent, when he says that the woman will bruise the seed of the woman will bruise its head. It'll strike his heel.
Yeah.
So Jesus was struck. He was hurt.
Yeah. But
he comes back and finishes Satan.
Right.
I mean, it's right. It's the whole story is there.
Right.
It's and
you know,
and we avoid talking about it, I think, because science scares us away from. But then we've given science over to. Allowed that to be taught in our schools, and so that's the way everybody's being brought up. So now, rather than like Peter on Pentecost, you mentioned how the Jews didn't understand. All he had to do on Pentecost was stand up and explain. Now I'm saying all, but was explain to them that Jesus was that person they were waiting for.
Right.
But we don't have it that easy, if you will, because we have to explain who God is.
Yeah.
To many generations that, I mean, at least back as old as I am, who were taught other things. Mm-hmm. And now they need to know who God is and then understand who Jesus is. So, I mean, we're more like Paul.
Yeah.
If we go to town for 6 months and save 2 people, we had a great 6 months.
We have to unlearn a lot.
We do.
Yeah,
we do.
That is so true. And, when we look at that story of the creation, it's a continual theme. If we even start with Cain and Abel, okay, there's a continual theme of pride. There's a theme of power struggles. There's all these themes that we see in our world, in history, all the way through today. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We have changed. I mean, we obviously, technology and such. But what I mean is, through that all, God hasn't changed at all. He hasn't changed the story.
And Satan hasn't changed. He continues to just twist.
Right.
Just like did he really say that?
Right.
And we get the same thing. Is that really right? You don't need Genesis.
And you said that we talk about what God told Eve and serpent when the sin occurred. I spoke to a person in the last couple of weeks, very close to me, won't say who it is, that said, every religion has that story. If you look in Hindu, there's a story of a virgin birth. If you look at pagans, I was like, of course there is.
Yes, because they're copying the Bible.
Right. If I want to convince people to not believe something, I'm going to make up stories. I'm going to copy that story. Where they go wrong is, first of all, they say that their stories predate the Bible. Well, yeah, because God told Satan what he was going to do.
Yeah,
so Satan says, I'm going to go start telling people, I know there's going to be a virgin birth. I know that this is going to happen. So I'm going to start making these things before Jesus ever comes.
Absolutely.
Sure, but God said it first, back in Genesis chapter 3. So it's a stolen story to try to make people who want to believe in science, whereas science and faith complement one another. They do not contradict one another. No. They complement one another. But people that don't want to accept that there's something beyond science, that faith can have power, they latch onto these stories and say, look, yeah, you're wrong, because this is a Hindu story. This is a pagan story. It's a stolen story. It's called plagiarism. Satan would go to jail for that today.
He would. But yes.
Copyright violation.
And most of them are, like when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, going back several years ago, and it was a big deal mainly because people believed that this is going to disprove the Bible.
Right.
Well, then it got very quiet. You hardly ever hear anything about them.
Okay.
But I saw the other day that one of the things that they found in one of these Dead Sea Scrolls, one of these things, they have the entire book, I think they said 98% of the book of Isaiah. Mm-hmm. What does Isaiah do? Isaiah is clearer than any other prophesies Jesus coming.
Absolutely.
So we have this. It was written over 100 years prior to Christ being born. So it can't be something that a bunch of guys got together and just wrote down. I mean, that was...
Yeah,
there's evidence out there. Now, I think it's a good time to be a Christian because I think the evidence is coming. I think there are more scientists, geologists than in the past who are willing to say, well, wait a minute. Like you mentioned the flood. Once again, we could talk about that forever.
Sure.
But there was a flood over the entire earth. Why do we find fossils all over why do we find little sea animals up in the mountains in fossils?
Not
because there was a flood.
Right.
People didn't dig them up and carry them up in the mountain and bury them in the mud so they'd be a fossil. Right. They were buried in the catastrophic event like a flood.
Right.
I mean, just basic common sense.
I was in 5th grade. We had a little experiment where we had to get a pan and put dirt and rocks in it, and we put water in one side and we tilt it for erosion. That right there tells you that the power of water and a global flood, the power that can create something like the Grand Canyon.
Right, absolutely.
Just overnight, especially if God's behind it. I mean, he said, let there be light, and there was light when there was nothing. So yes, it can happen.
When Mount St. Helens erupted.
Yeah. 1981?
Yes. They call it the mini Grand Canyon.
Okay.
It's only a 40th of the size of the Grand Canyon.
Okay.
So it's not anywhere near that deep, but it's very much like it. It's got a small river running through the bottom of it. 6 hours.
Really?
6 hours from a volcano.
Created a canyon.
It created a canyon that was not there before in 6 hours.
Oh my!
1/40th of the size of the Grand Canyon. So a year-long flood?
Yeah. Or 40 days.
Well,
it rained for 40 days.
It was 40 days, but
a year-long flood.
I mean, the water was sloshing around.
Right.
And finding paths back into the ocean. And
and again, growing up, in Ohio history, they taught us about the glaciers, and because where I grew up, there's 3 definitive ridges. And they say, well, the glacier came and they pushed this far and then it stopped and it pushed this far. And that's why we have the three ridges. I believed that for years.
Yeah.
Like, okay, 50,000 or 50 million years ago. I don't know how many years ago. But whatever, 50
Whatever
something.
they said, yeah, it was probably 50 million.
Probably
It's probably
50 million.
500 million now.
We're
Because it keeps getting older and older because they're still trying to justify evolution.
Yeah, parents don't talk to their kids, so they'll never know that we
Yeah,
taught
they'll
them
never
50
know.
million. But anyway, I believed that for the longest time until I started studying the flood, and I'm like, that was caused by a flood.
Yeah.
That was not caused by a glacier that, I mean, sure.
There could have been glaciers.
There could have been,
I
sure.
mean, but yeah, the flood could cause every piece of land masses we have.
Yeah,
So
could have caused the Great
So much
Lakes
stuff. Absolutely.
instead of a glacier melting. It was
Instead of a glacier melt. Yeah.
just push in there, and then as it receded, it left us some great fishing spots.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh man, this has been fun, Jim.
It's been fun. One thing I want to
Yeah.
add, just because this is one of those personal things to me, but you mentioned
Absolutely.
the Tower of Babel.
Sure.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, they were building the tower but the other thing that seems skipped over a lot in the Tower of Babel is God, when Noah and his sons came off the boat, he said, spread out and live, throughout the earth.
Right.
Your descendants need to go. And instead, they all went to one place.
Okay.
And I just think that, to me, that is a calling to, if I tell you to go, you need to go, or you're going to make me come down there and do something. And I don't want him to come down there and do something.
So now we're getting into obedience.
Well, yeah, it is. But I mean, for me personally, I feel like
Yeah.
that part of it is skipped a lot.
Sure. Yeah. I understand.
But God says spread out. Don't all congregate in one place,
Right.
even if it's more convenient. So that's just my thoughts.
No, that's excellent actually, because that leads right into the Tower of Babel. Because
Yeah, I mean,
that's where the people came from.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
the people from Noah, and
Right. Right. Okay. That's really good. Thank you for bringing that up.
just it's one of those things, just so much stuff right now that
Yeah.
as you allow yourself to dig into Genesis. And I'll do my plug for Answers in Genesis, the folks that
Yes.
the folks that built the Ark and the Creation Museum. And there are several other really good sources. But if you get some of their books or watch some of their YouTube stuff, there is so much information by real scientists, not by two guys just sitting here chatting, but by scientists who have, most of them have master's or doctorate degrees, and they study these things, and they're saying, no, if you start with a biblical perspective, it is so much easier to understand why this stuff happened.
Right. Right. It is. And that's the thing. If you start with the biblical perspective, but in our day and age, and I'm sure it's been this way,
Yes.
not just our day and age,
No, it's been a lot of years.
Yeah, do not want to start with that perspective for
Right.
whatever reason. So what God has been telling me lately is pray for them, let me deal with them. Because,
Yep.
and this is more of a personal thing for me, that I felt like, well, I got to go out there and I got to tell these people, you got to read the Bible. God doesn't want me hitting people over the head with the Bible.
No.
You let them know, you plant the seed, you pray for them, he will take care of them. And I've seen
Yes.
people come as a result of that. Not because of my prayers, I'm not saying that, as a result of
because
God
you
working
just
in their
give
lives.
them enough information
Yeah.
and then let God take it from there.
That's what he did with me.
Yeah.
I didn't go to church as a child more than 5 or 6 times, and he put inside me the desire to know him more, and I jumped on it, and
Yeah.
here I am.
And that's what he can do.
That's what he can do. Definitely. So we are out of time.
All right. Well, this has been fun.
It has been fun. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
welcome.
And I'm not sure if Ian will be back next week or not, but he and I have been talking about doing like a remote type of setup so we can interview people remotely. So I think watch for it. I don't know for sure, but next week you might see Ian and I doing some kind of remote type of program.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, so we might
be
try it
fun.
out next week. And if there's no uplift next week, it's because we failed miserably. But, hopefully, we're going to try that out next week, if especially if you're still not feeling well. But we'll see how it goes. But Jim, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming in tonight, filling in for Ian. Glad to have you, and really appreciate all the knowledge you have. And
No.
we'll have you back on sometime. Maybe we could talk a little more about the flood or the tower or something you're really
Whatever.
passionate about.
Whatever. We'll get there
Okay.
when we need to.
We will.
All right.
God leads, right?
It's been good. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you everyone for joining in tonight, and we'll see you again next week. Maybe not from here, maybe remotely. We'll see how it goes. Good night and God bless.
Good night.